Every person around the world at one specific point in their lives have set goals of things they would like to achieve, to learn, to change, and to do in their lives. Every single person in this world have aspirations and goals and has and have vision of the person they would like to become. Working on and living according to this principle of setting goals and making plans to achieve those goals is something that gives meaning to our lives and that make us feel that we have a purpose on this earth and that we have a lot of things to do and a lot of new things to learn. Although this principle of setting goals is so important, it is factual. Around the world, everyone and everywhere, at least one time in their lives, have set a goal that they didn't complete. Now, when you think about this meaning of goals, I would like to ask you the following. Have you ever felt in your life that you are going like nowhere? Or rather, are you right now where you want to be or where you wanted to be? Probably some of you would say, yes, I am when I want to be. Probably some others would say, well, I have never felt in my life that I'm going nowhere. But a big part of you probably would say, well, at least once I have felt that I'm going nowhere. Or probably, well, I'm not where I want to be right now. In its book, Jeff Olson explained a small principle that has the power to change our answers to these questions. In its book, The Slight Edge or The Slight Advantage, he explained the principle of a specific this, the slight edge. What is the meaning of this? Well, he explained that by doing small things every day, probably as is recorded in Alma, that by doing small and simple things, you will bring to pass big and great things. He explained that time has a really big impact in our lives and in our goals and how we achieve those goals. Then he says something interesting. To consider that someone succeeds in their lives, or to consider that someone is successful, we must see three factors that are correlated between each of them. First of all, a successful person is a person who enjoys of good health. Second, a successful person is a person who enjoys of financial security. And third, a successful person is this person who have good relationships, I mean the family and friends. He says that only 5% of all the population around the world are included in this frame of successful people, while the other 95% are not in this area. But why? Well, probably the people in these 95% enjoy good health and have good relationships, but they lack of financial security and they don't have enough money to cover all their needs. Probably some others have enough money and have good health, but they don't have good relationships and persons to share their happiness or their successful. And probably some others lag in these three areas in all the 3 points. Now, do we agree that it wasn't just good luck that these 5% succeed in their lives? What is different did these 5% to achieve a fullness of life? It is true that these people at some point and in some way apply the principle of the slight edge. And probably you're thinking, well, this is too good to be real, or well, I already know that I have to work hard to achieve my goals. But I repeat, the time has a great impact in your life. For example, what impact will have on your life drinking 1 cup of water every day? If you think used in one day, probably there will not be evident changes or consequences. But think over 50 years. What will be the difference? Another example. A simple cigarette smoked one day probably will not have an immediate and evident consequences. But again, think over 20 years by doing it every single day. A final example. It has been proved, that the student that spend 1 extra hour studying class topics at the semester end, that will be almost 150 more hours than the average student. Do you see now the impact of time and doing small things every day? Think on this phrase. Always your time value is bigger because you have less left. The people that don't use and apply the principle of a slight edge very often fall in unsatisfaction and in feelings of incompleteness and unhappiness. It is true that sometimes living on by diligence is hard and difficult and tough, but the results will come by the time if you apply this principle every day. So, you're probably thinking, I have a lot of things to change in my life. Where should I start? Begin by thinking and pondering and looking at all those things you don't feel satisfied in your life. You don't feel complete. You don't feel happy. Maybe bad habits, or maybe something you want to achieve. An example, if you want to have a savings account, start today with save just $1. But by the time I'm doing it every day, you will see results. The results of our plans and actions doesn't appear immediately, but as it is often said, trust in the process. The successful ones didn't achieve success from night to day. The truth is that you set your own limits. Be sure to set them first.